Naomi Brooks stepped into her flagship restaurant, B Table, on a bustling Friday night, and not a single person recognized her as the founder. No spotlight, no assistant trailing behind. Just a black woman in a gray hoodie, hands in the pockets of her jeans, walking straight into a space filled with the scent of garlic butter and the hum of refined laughter. She wasn't here to be seen. She was here to see. As she passed the bar, Naomi suddenly stopped. A sound, barely audible, was buried beneath the clinking of silverware and the soft jazz playing overhead. It came from the hallway leading to the break room. A muffled sob, small, choked, so tightly held in it was almost non-existent. Naomi tilted her head, her eyes hardened. Comment 1. If you believe the quietest cries can be more terrifying than the loudest screams. B Table, located in the heart of Atlanta, was the first restaurant Naomi ever built. Every detail had been intentional. Crystal chandeliers casting golden light, black artists' work lining the walls, and a menu blending traditional soul food with Afro-Caribbean modernity. On the surface, this was a dream realized. A place where Black excellence could gather, dine, and feel powerful without seeking permission. But Naomi knew better. A restaurant is not measured by the shine of its tables, but by the size in the break room. By the glances that never meet at the end of a long night shift. Tonight, she wasn't here to check profits. She came to check people. Naomi Brooks, once a chef who survived countless brutal kitchens, now the founder of an entire food empire. But the most important thing she'd ever learned? Listen to the ones nobody listens to. Jada Ellis, a young waitress, just 24, brown skin, tight curls pulled into a bun, eyes sunken from exhaustion. Since her mother passed, she'd been the sole provider for her family, and now she was crying, alone, in the break room. Micah Harris, Jada's coworker, and the only person who walked in when Naomi passed by. His voice was low, his glance uneasy. You just gotta hold on, Jada. Around here, nobody's gonna help you. Naomi was just steps away from the break room door. Her hand clenched her bag strap as Jada's voice cracked through the wall. She said, if I don't do what she wants, she'll change my shift or take me off the schedule. Micah's voice followed, weary. Kelsey always does that. Push back, you disappear. Naomi turned away, heart heavy. Kelsey, the same manager Naomi had received multiple unofficial complaints about, sweet-talking, polished, always just clean enough to escape accountability. No solid proof, not enough to fire her. But tonight, Naomi didn't need proof. She had truth. Naomi quietly took a seat at the bar. Raymond, the bartender, handed her a drink. No questions asked. He'd seen plenty of strangers walk in, but her eyes were sharp, cold, watching. From across the room, Naomi spotted Kelsey standing near the hostess stand, hands clasped behind her back, surveying the room like a hawk. Micah stepped out of the break room, face stiff, avoiding Kelsey's gaze. Naomi stood, walked toward him, and spoke low. You got a pen? Micah flinched. Yeah. She read his name tag. Micah, I just passed the break room, heard someone crying. Was that your friend? Micah swallowed. She's just tired. Naomi's stare sharpened. I've been that kind of tired before. I recognize that look. He didn't answer, but his hands were shaking. Naomi asked, once more, Is it a customer issue? Micah looked toward Kelsey, then shook his head. It's the manager. His voice dropped to a whisper. She keeps Jada late. Always alone. Talks to her like she owes her something. Naomi felt her chest tighten. She'd met this type before. They didn't scream. They smiled, while tightening the noose. Micah dropped his gaze. No one speaks up. If you do, you're gone. Naomi nodded slowly. She understood. And this time, no one was losing their job, except the one who fed off fear. Naomi pulled out her phone, jotted a few notes. She didn't need to wait anymore. The first piece of the puzzle was already in place. She wasn't someone who raised flags on the battlefield, but she sure as hell didn't retreat when blood was drawn. She looked at Kelsey, still smiling, still manipulating the room with invisible strings. Naomi stood, not fast, not dramatic, just right on time. She walked past the bar again, past the servers burying themselves in tasks, unaware that tonight the old order would crack. The party went on. The lights stayed bright. But inside Naomi, a quiet fire had ignited, not to burn it all down, but to light the truth. And if she had to set the whole damn system ablaze, so no one like Jada had to cry in silence again. Then Naomi Brooks was ready. Naomi leaned against the wall outside the restaurant. The night had settled over Atlanta like a black silk shawl. From where she stood, she could see it clearly. Warm lights spilling from the glass windows of the restaurant, her pride and joy, now hiding truths no one dared to tell. A staff member stepped out. Not Micah, not Jada. It was Raymond, the bartender. He was looking down at his phone, leaning against the wall, sighing. Naomi recognized that look immediately. Someone who knew something, but didn't know what to do with it. She walked over, slow and calm. Tough Friday shift? Raymond looked up, startled, but when he realized she wasn't a customer, he just nodded. Fridays, always a mess. Comment 1 if you've ever felt like the truth was hiding where no one's looking. Not in the reports. They stood together by the side of the building. The air was cool, no traffic noise, just long silences between two strangers who shared one thing: doubt. Inside, the restaurant buzzed on. Kelsey moved between tables, smiling, placing her hand gently on regulars' shoulders. The perfect show. Too perfect. Naomi didn't look inside. She looked at Raymond. She knew. Some questions didn't need to be spoken. Sometimes presence and real listening were louder, and sometimes all it took was someone to ask, "Are you okay?" To let silence crack. Raymond Liu, young Asian bartender, known for calm hands and knowing every bottle and every guest's glance. But tonight his eyes were dull, not from alcohol, but helplessness. Naomi asked evenly, "Your manager, Kelsey, she seems firm." Raymond chuckled dryly. "She likes things a certain way. On time, on script, with the right tone." Naomi tilted her head. "And the right people?" Raymond hesitated. His eyes flicked toward the door. Then in a whisper, "She keeps Jada back after every shift. Alone. Always has a reason. Always says it's special." Naomi felt the chill climb her spine. "Do you think Jada's okay?" Naomi asked. Raymond swallowed. "I see it, but what can we say? She doesn't need to shout. Just a look. A hand on the shoulder. Jada flinches every time she gets called into the office." Naomi said nothing. "Has anyone ever reported it?" "Number, because anyone who does, their name just disappears from next week's schedule." Naomi nodded slowly. She understood now. No one stayed silent because they didn't know. They stayed silent because they knew exactly what speaking up would cost, and so the manipulator thrived. "Did she ever talk to you?" Naomi asked. Raymond shook his head. "She didn't have to." She stopped smiling. "It's like she's just surviving shift to shift." Naomi looked down at her own hands. Once, she had been that person, working in kitchens under a gentle tyrant, not screaming, just slowly grinding your soul until you believed that endurance was survival. She couldn't let that happen again, not in her own restaurant. Raymond added quietly, "We all see it, but no one dares speak. Jada's the one person who can't afford to quit." Naomi looked up. "And that's why she's the one they chose." A breeze swept through, carrying noise from inside. Naomi lowered her voice. "Do you know you're a witness now?" Raymond looked at her, real fear flickering. "I'm just a bartender. I don't want trouble." Naomi cut in, her eyes locked. "And Jada lives in trouble every day." Silence. Then Raymond muttered, "I don't want anyone else to go through this." Naomi nodded. "Then this time, you won't stay silent." He didn't say more, but as she walked away, Naomi knew. Another light had turned on. Naomi re-entered the restaurant. She walked past Kelsey, still smiling, still playing her role of gracious command. But this time, Naomi didn't pass by. She stopped. "Kelsey?" she said, her voice polite, sharp like a blade in silk. "I need to speak with one of your staff. Jada." Kelsey paused for a beat, then smiled. "Of course, but perhaps after her shift." "No, now." Kelsey blinked. Naomi smiled. "I'm a customer. I'm asking to speak with a team member, or I'll speak to someone above you." Kelsey nodded, but the smile had cracked. Naomi walked to the end of the bar where Jada stood with a forced smile and tear-reddened eyes. She said softly, "I know, and I'm here." Jada looked confused, but Naomi didn't wait for understanding. She added, "We'll talk, but not here. And next time, it'll be me calling for you, not Kelsey." Jada nodded hesitantly, then stopped herself. She wasn't sure yet, but doubt was giving way to something else. Naomi turned away. In her eyes, the fire had fully ignited. "You're the kind of employee everyone likes, Jada. Don't lose that just because you forgot how to stay silent at the right time." Kelsey stood beside table 14, her hand resting lightly on Jada's back, like a casual guiding gesture. But no one saw the pressure in that hand, just enough to make Jada's spine stiffen. Naomi saw it. She was at the bar, half turned, pretending to study the cocktail menu, but her eyes never left that scene. Kelsey smiled politely at the guests. Jada, meanwhile, couldn't even meet their eyes. She just lowered her head, scribbled the order quickly, and stepped back, like a silent shadow. Comment 1 if you've ever seen a smile. That made the person across from it tremble. It was almost 9 p.m. The pace had slowed, the crowd had thinned, but the tension inside the table was thicker than ever. Kelsey still played the role of the model manager, composed, refined, in control of every detail. She didn't yell, she didn't insult, just a glance, and words as soft as air were enough to let staff know that resistance was not on the menu. Naomi was still playing the guest, but her gaze had shifted. She wasn't watching the room anymore. She was watching power and how it was being used. Kelsey, white, blonde hair tied high, crisp white blouse, heels tapping evenly on the wooden floor. To customers, she was the embodiment of elegance. To staff, a shadow no one dared to touch. Naomi had met dozens of Kelseys in her life, people who mastered the art of masking manipulation behind the culture of professionalism. They never said it outright, but they made sure others stayed silent. Jada, still in her polished black uniform, tray in hand, but her palms were soaked with sweat. She had just finished taking the order at table 14 when Kelsey came over, not for any real reason, just to check the attitude. Naomi stood up, not to make a scene, but to step in, at the right time, with the right person. As Jada returned to the order station, Naomi approached her. She lowered her voice, soft as if asking for directions. "Could you help me with something?" Jada startled, nearly dropping her tray. "Huh? Oh, yes, ma'am. What do you need?" Naomi looked her straight in the eye. "You seem a little off. Are you all right?" Jada's eyes flicked quickly toward Kelsey, who was now chatting with customers, then forced a smile. "I'm just a bit sleep-deprived." Naomi paused. "People don't tremble just from lack of sleep, Jada." Jada's gaze dimmed, her lips pressed into a thin line. Then, barely audible, she whispered, "If I speak up, I'll be fired. No one else will hire me." Naomi exhaled. This wasn't the moment for confrontation or pressure. She took a half step back and changed her tone. "Back in the day, I worked restaurants too, 15 hours a day. I heard the phrase, 'Just be good and things will go smoothly,' at least 100 times. Jada looked up. For the first time, her eyes held both doubt and curiosity. "And then?" she asked. Naomi shrugged. "I walked away, but not everyone gets to do that." Jada gave a bitter smile. "I can't. I've got my mom's hospital bills, rent. I don't have a way out." Naomi gave a slow nod. "Then I'll make one." Right then, the sound of heels echoed sharply. Kelsey was approaching, smiling, but her lips were starting to tighten. Is there a problem here? Jada immediately bowed her head. No, ma'am, I was just assisting a guest. Naomi didn't turn around. She kept looking at Jada, replying softly. She was assisting me, and doing it very well. Kelsey kept her polite tone. I just want to make sure everything's running smoothly. Naomi finally turned, facing her directly for the first time. Smoothly, meaning she does everything without ever daring to speak? Kelsey froze, but still smiled. You're a guest, I understand, but my staff follows protocol. Naomi nodded. I understand, but there are also boundaries that deserve respect. Naomi didn't escalate it, not yet, but her eyes sent a message loud and clear. I see you, and I'm watching. Kelsey held her ground for a second, then nodded and walked away. But she knew. The dynamic had shifted. Naomi turned back to Jada. You don't need to say anything, but if there comes a time when you're ready to speak, you won't have to do it alone. Jada stared at Naomi for a long time. Her hands still trembled, but for the first time, it wasn't just from fear. Naomi touched the edge of the table gently. My name's Naomi, Jada nodded. I'm Jada. Naomi walked away from the order station, passing through the rows of tables now being cleaned up at the end of shift. She didn't look at anyone, but everyone looked at her. They didn't know who she was, but they saw, for the first time, someone had dared to speak. Kelsey turned her head to follow Naomi, her gaze sharp as a blade, but no longer certain. Naomi returned to the bar, sat in her original seat. She pulled out her phone and opened her notes. Wrote one single line. Kelsey confirmed. Step 1, reach Jada. Step 2, expose her in front of witnesses. She's my employee, not your property. Kelsey didn't raise her voice, but the words struck hard enough to silence the entire prep kitchen. Naomi stood there, across from her, one hand resting lightly on the cold stainless steel counter. She didn't flinch. Jada, caught between them, kept her head bowed so low it seemed she wanted to melt into the floor. She had never been pulled into a standoff like this, let alone had someone publicly stand for her. Naomi didn't turn her head. She spoke slowly, clearly, every word for Kelsey to hear. You're right. She's an employee, but you don't own her. Comment 1 if you believe no one has the right to own someone's silence, not even a boss. 10 p.m. The restaurant was winding down. The last few guests trickled out, the soft clink of spoons against coffee cups echoing faintly. It seemed like a calm moment. But the air in the prep station was chokingly tense. Naomi had requested to speak with Jada privately, using the excuse of service feedback to avoid drawing attention. She'd chosen a quiet space near the kitchen, away from too many wandering eyes. Kelsey, as if sniffing the shift in power, arrived right on cue. And for the first time, Naomi didn't dodge. The confrontation had begun, not with shouting, but with gazes and words. Jada stood in the middle, like a blade pulled taut between two wires. Her hands clutched her apron, her eyes flicked between Naomi and Kelsey, not sure who to believe, or whether she could even believe in herself. Kelsey now no longer smiled. Her face tightened, her eyes slightly wider than normal, her voice clinging to a fragile veneer of politeness. Naomi remained composed. Her tone wasn't loud, but every word carried the weight, not of a customer, but of someone who had once stood exactly where Jada stood now. And Naomi knew. This wasn't about one person anymore. This was about how a system feeds off fear. Jada isn't allowed to speak privately with customers without notifying management, Kelsey said, her lips curving into a synthetic smile. Naomi replied immediately, I'm not interviewing her, I'm listening. Kelsey stepped forward, arms crossed. If there's feedback, you can email it. This is working hours. Naomi tilted her head. Oh? So working hours means keeping a staff member past shift without extra pay? Jada flinched. She turned toward Naomi, stunned. Kelsey didn't respond, but Naomi caught it, the flicker in her eyes. the panic starting to crack through her polished facade. Naomi turned to Jada, her voice softening. You don't have to say anything if you're not ready. But look at me and hear this. You are not alone. Jada's lips tightened. If I talk, I lose my job. And if you don't talk, you lose yourself, Naomi answered. They never write that part in the contract. A moment of silence. Then Jada murmured, barely audible, I don't even know where to start. Naomi said, start with what scares you the most. Jada looked at Kelsey, then turned back and whispered, she made me believe that staying silent was the only choice I had. Kelsey slammed her palm onto the metal counter. The sound cracked through the room. Who do you think you are, coming in here and breaking rules during my shift? Naomi calmly reached into her purse. No rush, no drama. She pulled out a card and laid it flat on the table. Naomi Brooks, founder, B-Table Group. Kelsey went pale. Jada froze. A prep cook nearby dropped a porcelain plate. Naomi spoke slowly. I'm not interfering. I'm correcting a mistake. The mistake was giving you authority over a space you clearly don't understand, because you don't understand people. Kelsey tried to regroup, voice trembling. If there's been a misunderstanding, I'd like to clarify with HR. You won't need to call. Naomi cut her off. I will. She pulled out her phone, tapping with practiced precision. When I walk out of here, you walk out of this system. Not a single B-Table location will have your name on its schedule again. Kelsey stumbled back, leaning against the fridge behind her. Naomi turned to Jada. You don't need to worry. The changes begin tonight. Jada didn't move. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. She simply stood still, stunned. Naomi stepped forward and gently placed a hand on her shoulder. No pressure, just presence. There are people who spend their whole lives waiting to hear someone ask, Are you okay? Naomi said. From now on, I want B-Table to be a place where that question is always present. Jada nodded slightly, and for the first time she spoke, not from fear, but from belief. I don't want anyone else to stay silent, the way I did. Naomi turned away, leaving Kelsey standing there, like a shadow with nowhere left to hide. I think the real owner should say a few words. Naomi stepped into the center of the dining hall, just as the night shift was winding down. Only a few tables remained, the lighting dimmed, silverware clinking quietly. But with just one line, spoken calmly, without urgency, every head turned. Kelsey, standing near the hostess stand, whipped around, her face pale. Jada, Micah, and Raymond froze in place. A prep cook peeked through the swinging kitchen doors. Naomi didn't need a microphone, didn't need a spotlight. She simply raised her hand and held up a card. Naomi Brooks, founder, B-Table Restaurant Group. Comment 1 if you've ever wished someone would stand up and call injustice by its true name. The energy in the restaurant shifted instantly. All whispers died. Staff straightened up, unsure of what was unfolding. Kelsey stood frozen, as if the power had drained from her high heels in an instant. Naomi stepped into the center of the room, golden light catching her composed face. She didn't need to yell. She didn't need to accuse. The silence itself was the loudest confirmation of what had just taken place. Naomi drew a breath, her eyes sweeping across every employee. Tonight, I didn't come here to check sales. I came to face the things you've been too afraid to say. Kelsey remained in place, clinging to a smile, but the stiffness in her shoulders, the faint tension in her brow. Naomi saw it all. She knew. Kelsey had realized the end had arrived. Micah stood behind the counter, tray in hand, unmoving. Raymond leaned against the bar, eyes darting between Naomi and Kelsey. Jada, for the first time, didn't hide. She stood in the far left corner, gripping the edge of her apron, but her eyes no longer looked away. She wasn't waiting for a miracle. She was waiting for something real. Justice. And Naomi, the woman who had once walked away from power to preserve her dignity, was now turning herself into the verdict. Kelsey spoke, still trying to sound gentle. There may be some misunderstanding here. I'm sure whatever just happened can be explained. Naomi didn't answer right away. Instead, she turned toward the bar. I'll let you all hear exactly what I heard tonight. She tapped her phone. A recording played. Jada's voice, shaky and tearful. If I don't do what she says, she told me she'd cut my shifts. Then Micah's voice. She has no right to do that to you. The entire restaurant went silent. Naomi turned the recording off. Her voice was steady. So now, do you still have something to explain, Kelsey? Kelsey backed up a step. I didn't know I was being recorded. That's not admissible. What's not admissible, Naomi cut in, is assigning someone to solo night shifts 3 times a week without reason. Guests at the last few tables began murmuring. Someone raised their phone. Kelsey looked around, realizing she was no longer the center of order. She was the center of exposure. Naomi went on, her voice unchanged. The table wasn't built so employees would fear coming to work. It was built so we could all be proud. Then she turned to Jada. From this moment on, no one gets to silence you again. Kelsey snapped. You're destroying my reputation over one-sided stories. Naomi met her eyes without blinking. I'm destroying a myth. That power means staying above others simply because they're afraid to speak. Then she turned to the entire team. If any of you has ever felt mistreated, disrespected, threatened, say it. Right now. Right here. A long silence. Then Micah spoke slowly. I got moved to the back shift for saying no to an unreasonable task. Raymond added, she made me mop the floor in the middle of peak service just because I asked for a day off. One voice, then 2, then more. And Kelsey, silent, had nowhere left to run. Naomi nodded. Thank you. This isn't rebellion. This is cleansing. She turned to Kelsey. You never laid a hand on anyone, but you strangled their dignity day after day with instructions just reasonable enough not to be sued. Naomi pulled up her phone. I'm calling HR. Your contract ends tonight, and I will personally ensure your file doesn't disappear. Kelsey stood frozen. A security staff member stepped forward, calmly inviting her to leave the premises. No one clapped, but the silence now was the loudest form of praise. Naomi turned, looking out at the entire team. The system is broken because we let it run on silence, but tonight, you chose not to stay silent anymore. Jada stepped forward. She didn't wait for permission. She simply said, I'm not afraid anymore, and if I could speak up, then others will too. Naomi nodded. From now on, every change begins here, with all of you. Micah asked quietly, so, what happens next? Naomi looked around, every eye on her. She smiled. For the first time that night, it was truly gentle. What happens next is we rewrite the way this system works. If she hadn't spoken up, maybe the rest of us would still be silent. Micah said it as Naomi stepped back into the break room, a space that just hours earlier had echoed with muffled sobs. Now the entire team was present. No one had been forced to stay. They sat down on their own. They opened up on their own. Naomi leaned against the doorway. She didn't interrupt. She just listened. No chandeliers, no music playing. Only the voices of people who once believed they were too small to change anything. Comment 1 if you've ever felt small, until someone stood up and pulled you to your feet with them. The old break room, usually just a pit stop during long shifts, today it became the first meeting room, where every employee was free to speak the truth. Paper cups filled with cold coffee, plastic chairs in a loose circle. In the center of the table sat a blank sheet of paper, where Naomi had written in bold marker, if you could change one thing about the way we work, what would it be? No scoreboards, no deadlines, just one question. Asked seriously for the first time. And a room full of eyes. that were finally starting to look up, not down. Micah was the first to write on the paper. Stop using fear to manage people. Raymond added, let staff speak up without risking their shifts. An older server named Marla, her hair streaked with gray, hesitated before writing. I've been here 8 years. Never once was I asked about my schedule. Naomi nodded. She didn't speak much. Her role now wasn't to command. It was to rebuild trust. Jada sat at the far end of the room. Her hands still clutched the hem of her shirt. But her eyes had changed, no longer timid, now thoughtful, deep. But if we tell the truth, will it even change anything? Someone asked. The room fell silent. It was the question everyone had wondered. Naomi stepped into the circle, laid her hand gently on the table. You don't have to trust me. Trust yourselves. She looked at each of them. I didn't come here to make promises. I came here to lift the weight of a system that's been pressing down on your voices for far too long. A young staff member quietly shared, I once asked for a day off because my mom was sick. Kelsey called me in private and said, here, family doesn't come before work. Naomi's fists clenched. She knew this wasn't one bad manager, it was the result of a broken philosophy. Naomi picked up a whiteboard marker and wrote, starting today, we launched the Safe Shift program. Everyone looked around. Safe Shift is an internal channel for all B-Table employees across the system, where you can anonymously report concerns, request support, or ask for guidance without fear of retaliation. Micah blinked. Is that real? Naomi nodded. I used to work 15-hour shifts. I was screamed at in front of guests because they changed their order. I remember what it felt like to clock in and just pray to make it out. And I swear, no one in my system will carry that feeling again. Raymond asked, but what about people like Kelsey, at other locations? Naomi looked directly at him. We won't just remove the bad, we'll change how we choose the good. Jada stood up. No one called her. She chose to rise. I don't know if I'm qualified, but if there's one thing I want, it's that no one ever feels as alone as I did. Silence. Then Naomi stepped beside her. You don't need to know everything to lead change. You just need to be willing. Jada looked at the group. Then, if you need someone to help with scheduling, shift planning, I'll volunteer. Marla clapped. Micah nodded. Raymond smiled. Naomi whispered, from someone silenced, you just became someone who leads. Naomi gathered the whiteboard sheet and handed it to Jada. Starting next week, you and one more team member will join me in redesigning our operational protocols across the entire system. Jada's jaw dropped. Me? Really? Naomi nodded. It's time this restaurant was shaped by the ones who know what it feels like to be pushed to the margins. The team nodded in agreement. Naomi then pulled out a new commitment draft, not a dry internal policy, but a living code of ethics, firm and compassionate. We're not building a company, she said. We're building a community. Before leaving the break room, Naomi turned back. I used to think change was about flipping tables. But now I know sometimes change is just about rearranging the chairs. So everyone has a place to sit. She looked at Jada, Micah, Raymond, Marla. We're not perfect, but we're learning to do right, together. The cold neon lights still buzzed above, but the room felt warmer than ever before. Naomi opened the door and stepped out, headed for a meeting with the corporate legal team. Left behind were people who once felt broken, but were now learning how to heal, together. The break room used to echo with tears. Today, it echoes with decisions. Naomi said those words as she stepped into the same old room, where she once heard Jada sob quietly in fear. Now it had been transformed into a temporary personnel coordination office for the Atlanta branch. On the wall, a new shift schedule, approved by Jada and Micah themselves. At the center of the table, a color print of the Safe Shift strategy, bearing the signatures of every team member, signed voluntarily. No one was forced, no one was pressured. Raymond walked over and handed Naomi a cup of hot tea. She smiled. I think we just turned this little room into the new seat of power. Comment 1 if you've ever wished for a space, just small enough to take shelter but strong enough to change the system. 3 weeks had passed since Naomi exposed Kelsey, and nothing was the same anymore. The restaurant didn't close. There was no press conference. Naomi chose to work quietly but deeply. She kept the entire team on staff, inviting them into a reform initiative called Reroot, a program to replant trust from the ground up. The Breakroom became their nightly hub. No desks, no titles, just a whiteboard, a few markers, and questions that were no longer brushed aside. No one imagined that the most overlooked corner would become the compass guiding a new direction. Jada was no longer the timid waitress. She now served as internal coordinator of BeVoice, an employee group granted direct feedback access to corporate each month. Micah was now in charge of training new hires. Raymond led internal communications. Marla, the longtime veteran, had been invited to act as community advisor, ensuring the voice of the older generation wouldn't be forgotten. And Naomi, no longer a supervisor, but simply the founder again. Laying the foundation, then stepping back so others could rise on it. One Friday afternoon, Naomi received an email from another branch. A new manager is forcing staff to log extra hours without officially scheduling them. She opened her laptop and stared at the system map. 42 locations, 12 states, hundreds of people. Jada walked in and saw Naomi's expression darken. Something wrong? She asked. Naomi turned the screen toward her. Charlotte branch, same setup, same silence. Jada looked at the map for a moment. Her eyes didn't waver. I remember that feeling, when you shake just from asking for a day off. She took a deep breath. This time, I'm not going because anyone asked. I'm going because I used to wish someone had done this for me. 3 days later, Naomi received a video from a staff member at the Charlotte branch. In it, Jada sat among a small group of employees. No spotlight, no speech. She simply shared, I used to work in a place where asking for time off to care for my sick mom was seen as unprofessional. The group sat in silence. Then she added, and now I'm standing here, not because I'm stronger, but because I stopped believing in that fear. Naomi watched the video again, then once more. Each time she saw it clearer. The story didn't end in Atlanta. That was just the beginning. The following week, Naomi convened a nationwide meeting, bringing together representatives from all 42 locations. Jada was invited to speak, but she didn't take the stage. She chose to stand in the center of the room, at eye level with everyone. We've been trained to only speak when spoken to, she said, but I want to ask you something. If no one ever asks, will you stay silent forever? Silence, then a wave of applause. Then one person spoke, then another, then another. Naomi stood at the back of the room, never saying a word, because what she wanted to build wasn't applause for herself. It was a wave that couldn't be stopped. Of voices once buried in break rooms, Naomi pulled a document from her jacket pocket, Leadership 2.0, a new management training program developed entirely from within. No more hiring outside directors. No more promotions based solely on degrees without compassion. Micah, the first candidate. Jada, the lead coordinator. Marla, operations ethics advisor. Raymond, head of organizational culture. Naomi signed the official approval, then passed the pen to each of them. We're not just changing who sits in the seat, she said. We're changing how that seat is designed. That evening, Naomi returned to the old break room, now repainted with artwork hung on the walls and a new nameplate above the door, the voice room. On the wall, in bold lettering, no one was born to stay silent in a system they helped build. Naomi sat quietly in the back corner. She didn't speak. She didn't film. She just smiled. Then softly, she wrote the final line in the system's journal. Never underestimate a small room. It might be big enough to hold a revolution. Comment 1 if you believe every great change begins with one person who dares to speak up in one small room. Some people don't enter our lives like thunder. They arrive with quiet resolve. Naomi didn't shout. She didn't slam the table. She didn't demand to be heard because she was the one who chose to listen first. This isn't a story about superheroes. It's about the ones who used to be stuck at the end of the shift, the end of the table, the bottom of the list. But instead of staying silent, they chose the simplest form of resistance. They spoke. To anyone who's ever worked in a place that made you feel like just a number, that taught you silence was the only way to survive. Remember this: silence doesn't protect you. It only protects the people who want to keep the power. And if you are a Black woman who's ever been left out of the meeting, called too sensitive, forced to say yes, when your heart screamed, "I've had enough," then Naomi and Jada are your reflection. Not because they're perfect, but because they had the courage to start healing from the very room that once broke them. And if right now you're sitting in a small room wondering if your voice will ever be heard, then remember, that room, that voice, is exactly where revolutions begin. You don't need a title to lead, you just need to refuse to be silent. Comment 1 if you believe that one voice, spoken at the right moment, can rewrite an entire system once believed untouchable.